So we've configured a DRS cluster and we've moved our two hosts into it. Our virtual machines are now associated with the cluster rather than the hosts directly. But let's take a look at the configuration of a DRS cluster. So if I go to my cluster 1 object, I can just right click on it and then access its settings. You'll see we have some of the same options we had before. We can add a host directly here. We can create a virtual machine, a resource pool, or a VApp, a collection of virtual machines that act together to provide a service. You'll see within vSphere DRS, we have the automation level that it already asked us for during the initial configuration of the cluster. If we take a look at the advanced options, we'll see that we have the ability to provide override options of various types. And if you take a look in the VMware documentation, there may be some things that are useful for your environment. If we look at the DRS Groups Manager, we can create groups of virtual machines and also groups of hosts. And if, for example, some of the hosts within our cluster are faster than others and some of our virtual machines are of a higher priority than others, we can actually use those definitions and create relationships and so on. In this case, I don't really have a large number of virtual machines or a large number of hosts. So if I take my two Windows virtual machines and add them over to the other side, and then I'll create Windows virtual machines. And this is actually useful because what I'm going to do is I want to create a rule that says I want to keep these two apart. They're not really configured with any services in this environment, but if those were two domain controllers, for example, that I was virtualizing, it'd be much better to have them on two different hosts. So if I have a host failure, my service continues. And I'll just create one group and put one machine in it. Once we go into the rules interface, you'll see that we have the option to create different types of rules, such as keeping virtual machines together, keeping them apart, or associating a preference for certain virtual machines to certain hosts. So if I go into the virtual machines, we'll see that I can pick a group, but it doesn't give me the option to pick an individual VM. So you might actually need to create groups of only one object to be able to do this if you have a particular need for that. But if you take a look, we can select the group that we've created, and then when we take a look at the various options here, we can see we've got the option must run on hosts in group, and those will never run on any other host. They should run on the hosts in group. So if for whatever reason, for an HA event, for putting various hosts in maintenance mode or those sorts of issues, once everything gets back to normal, we'd like to have it put back to the way that it was. So I'm not going to apply any of these rules, and you'll see I've also got the option to pick the host group. So you'll have to, again, potentially create a group of one or whatever other groups that you want to use. If different virtual machines have different requirements for different hosts, you may even have some additional groups that you have to create to manage those relationships. This could get a little bit complicated in a large environment. If we go to the virtual machine options, we can actually change the automation level for a particular machine. If we have a virtual machine that is not capable of participating in vMotion for compatibility reasons, then what we could do is use DRS for the initial placement of that virtual machine when it starts up. Then that would still be useful to have in the cluster, but we just don't want it to ever be moved around automatically by the cluster. We might still want to have recommendations made for us, and that might tell us that it's time to shut it down and move it somewhere else, but we might want to put it in manual mode, for example, or maybe we want to provide a different level of automation. We can customize that for each virtual machine. I'm just going to leave them all at the default in this case. And again, some power management options that we'll take a look at separately. If we go to VMware EVC, we can see I've currently got it disabled, but we could enable it here. Now at this point, one of the things that we may need to do is handle a shutdown of a host in the cluster. So now that we're configured to be able to do vMotion automatically, then one of the things that we're going to want to be able to do is when we need to shut down a host is have it automatically evacuate the workload of that host. So by placing the host into maintenance mode, if we have machines that are DRS controlled and vMotion capable, they'll be vMotioned to other hosts automatically. I'll go to one of my hosts and I'll just say that I want to enter maintenance mode by right-clicking on it, choosing enter maintenance mode. It warns me that I'm going to move what I can, but you might have to go in and check the status of the virtual machines and make sure everything's shut down before it actually goes into maintenance mode. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and say that I do want to have it move any powered off and suspended virtual machines as well. So I'm going to say yes. And now it's, again, warning me that we may have to do some things manually. And we can see that we've had a vMotion started automatically for W2K R2-2. And we can also see that under the Enter Maintenance Mode task, it's waiting for VMs to be powered off or migrated. Now that that's happened, we can see that the host is in maintenance mode, and I might want to go ahead and now do a reboot of that host or maybe shut it down to do whatever maintenance or whatever else it is that I need to do. When I've done that, if I restart the host and come back in, it'll stay in maintenance mode. I can verify that it's working the way I expect. Maybe I'll be going into the configuration tab and making sure that it sees all the data stores and sees all the networks, just to ensure that I have a high degree of confidence that this is going to come back up correctly and not interfere with the cluster. Once we're ready to do that, we can go ahead and say we want to exit maintenance mode. Depending on the level of automation you've specified for DRS, there could be a workload sent here pretty quickly. We'll take a look at generating workload recommendations and applying those recommendations in another video. But that gave us a pretty good idea as to how to look at the additional configuration options for the cluster and also how to deal with having to shut down hosts within the cluster.